Hey, back again. And I'm making an Elden Ring video for the very first time, which may be a shocker to you. I have been playing Elden Ring for a whole entire year now. Basically, ever since when I released it on February. And I'm gonna tell you this, I really love this game. This is one of my most favorite games. And I have to say, it's one of the best games that has been released since the last five, 5 to 6 years. But anyway, the reason why I'm making this video is that I'm sharing a build with y'all. Yes, it's going to be a build video. Because, well, actually, I wouldn't even know if you can consider this as a build. As literally, I am max level. As you can see here, 713, everything 99, max level. I don't even think you can consider this as a build. You can basically consider this as a setup, pretty much. But for y'all, it's basically a build. And this build is what I call the Albinauric Sorcery build. Yes, the Albinauric Sorcery build. As it utilizes the Albinauric staff, which that's kind of the only thing Albinauric about this. Besides the Albinauric mask, which you don't really need to use the Albinauric mask if you don't like it. I'm using that because of the memes. And it just brings. I mean, look at that face. That's the face I've seen Chaos countless times, and just like, why the fuck do I even still do this anymore? That's what face that is. I mean, look at that face. Look at that face. Like, I mean, it's not even a smile. This dude looked like you saw the most like, this guy basically looked like he's seen so much shit. He basically is gonna have the face of shit, is what this looks like. But anyway, enough about that. So, what you need for this build, is obviously an Abinar staff. But what else you will want is a Bloodthorn Rip. Why a Bloodthorn Rip? Well, since this, oh, let me look. Wrong button, y'all. Since this raises arcane but reduces HP recovery effects of the Flask of Crimson Tears, you basically kind of want to invest into arcane. And since when I was making this build right, I wanted to be a fun, unique build. I was like, I've never seen any sorcerers use a whip. I have never seen one sorcerer use a whip in their sorcery build. It's mostly either the flipping most popular Knight of Flame sword or some claymore spear with a flipping with the ice spear Asher War on it. You know, that type of bullshit. But what you want on your Bloodthorn Rip, this is the Asher War Raptor as a miss, and you want that on the occult, so it still does decent physical damage, but procs, like, you know, bleed really well. And I'm gonna tell you this, I would prefer this over this. The hostile pedal lip, okay, if I were to put occult, or if I were to put, you know, Bloodthorn Rip with bleed, it will obviously outperform blood buildup than the hostile pedal whip. But the only reason why I see people like the hostile pedal whip more is because it does more physical damage and it has more buildup when you put it on a cult than the Bloodthorn whip, which is the only reason why I see it be more popular than the Bloodthorn whip. But anyway, enough about that. What you also will want, which you rarely see any sorcerers do, well, actually, you've never seen any sorcerer, not even one. Name one video that you've seen a sorcerer use a flipping great turtle shield. Exactly, none. It's mostly this. This thing, this jellyfish shield. Which I'm gonna tell you this. If you believe that the Azure Ward buffs to your sorceries, I'm gonna say I have to be the elephant in the room to say this. It does not do none of that. That was just overhype and over speculation. It's literally like I even tested this multiple times just to make sure that I was not hallucinating. This thing does not do anything for sorceries. Like this is basically overhyped. I don't even think that was the purpose of the jellyfish shield. But anyway, I just had to get that big elephant out of the room. But what do you want for when it comes to armor sets? You don't really, like I said, you don't really need to have the Albinauric mask. I mean, you can use the Albinauric pointed hat if you wanted to. But like I said, I'm using this for like the memes and the funny ha 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 laughters. And I have, Raptor's black feathers, leather gloves, leather boots. So that, like, I mean, look at it. It looks stylish. But anyway, enough about that. Also, the Raptors and the black feathers. One of the reasons why I'm using Raptors and the black feathers. And I mean, I'm not only just using it for, style points and all that, but it also strengthens jump attacks. And that's really all it is. And this actual war on the, Bloodthorn Rip, when you, okay, this is essentially like a parry skill, but instead of parrying, it completely negates all damage and it basically launches you up in the air. Where you can do it, it basically already puts you in the animation of a jump attack, which actually gets strengthened by the Raptors of Black Feathers, which is also another reason why I'm using it. But anyway, the talismans you want to use is Godfrey's Icon, Radagon's Icon, Rollerblade Exaltation Talisman, and the Green Total Talisman to stack with, the Great Total Shield, which, by the way, you want the Great Total Shield with no skill. You don't really need a skill with this, and if you do, it sounds like a fucking skill issue. I am not lying. And you also want the Great Total Shield on Occult, because the reason why you want it on Occult, because Occult apparently boosts the stamina recovery speed, apparently. It gives it an extra tiny boost. But it's not that big to notice. But, yeah, there's the reason why you want it on Occult. And all that great juicy stuff. I'm sorry if I'm kind of, well, I don't know if you can call it stuttering. I'm just kind of having a hard time speaking today because my throat is sore and shit. I don't know if you can tell. But anyway, yeah. And the other benefits of having a great, or having an, like, your stamina recovery speed the great things of having your stamina recovery speed go up is, like, literally when you're doing a melee, or, let's say sorcery spam and stuff, that stamina recovery speed is a game changer. Most issues that comes to using a sorcery is the stamina. Not because they have enough stamina, it's because the stamina recovery speed is what screws them over. So having this shield as a no-brainer, and stacking this with it is a no-brainer as well. And you may be wondering, why do I have the Lord of Blood exaltation? Well, it's obviously for the Bloodthorn Whip, and the Bloodthorn Whip is really good at creating blood loss build-up. And the other reason why we're using the Lord of Blood exaltation is what I'm about to show you next. So your sorceries. What do you want for your sorceries, you may be asking? And what is the sorceries of this build? Well, let me show you. Great Blade Phalanx, VS Miss, Scarlet Shield, Terra Magica, Terrible Summons, Great Article Bubbles, Lucidity, Briars of Punishment, and Briars of Sin. Now, these two sorceries right here, Briars of Punishment and Briars of Sin, is the reason why we're using the Lord of Blood exaltation. It's because these things build up blood loss, obviously, if you're a veteran player of this game. But if you didn't know that, well, now you know. And there's a staff, right? Staff of the Guilty. This is during sorcery and called slight blood loss buildup. But you would notice something. It doesn't scale up an arcane. Which, on paper, right, it gives you a stronger Thorn Sorcery damage, but it's not enough where it's stronger than this. I will tell you the reason why. It's because the Albinauric staff, when you have this fully upgraded, which mine is not fully upgraded, right, it's only 24. The max upgrade you have for this is 25, which then the Sorcerer Skeleton would be the max 400. But the reason why the Albinauric staff does more damage for Bloodthorn Sorcerers than this is because, one, it boosts the blood loss effect. So, proccing blood loss with the Bloodthorns is really easily. But the only reason why it comes out stronger is because it has a higher sorcery scaling. So, for example, if I were... Okay, so if someone were to say, which one shall I use if I'm going to make, like, a magic sword sorcery build where you're using, like, Adela's Moonblade or something? I would tell them the Carrion Glint Blade Staff. The reason you may be looking at me like, well, why not the Carrion Glintstone Staff? It boosts Carrion Sword Sorcery. Well, as you can see, that Sorcery Skeleton gap right there, Carrion Glint Blade Staff to the Carrion Glintstone Staff, okay, it may not look that big, right? But let me tell you, Sorcery Skeleton has a lot of shit to do in this game. The higher the Sorcery Skeleton, the bigger the outcome is. And I have tested this theory so many times, and I have seen the Carrion Glintblade staff outperform the Carrion Glintstone staff. Even though the Carrion Glintstone staff boosts Carrion Sword Sorceries, which on paper it should do more sword sorcery damage than the Carrion Glintblade staff. The reason why it doesn't is because the Carrion Glintblade staff has more sorcery scaling. And the reason why I'm addressing this is because most people don't notice. Most people tell the people to go after this, right? You know, just go after the Carrion Glint Star Staff because they praise it off the High Moon because it boosts the Carrion Sword Sorcery and the cheesy spell sword sorceries like Adela's Moonblade off the moon. Is the reason why they mostly tell you to go with this. And besides, this staff is really easy to get, but the staff that's more easier to get is the Carrion Glintblade staff. But I don't know why the Carrion Glintblade staff gets so negated. I don't know why, because it's like it's a really good staff to use in the game. And even though it doesn't boost Carrion Sword Sorcery, it boosts one of the most common sorceries you would see sorcerers use, and that is Glintblade Sorcery. Which, if you don't know what a Glintblade... So yes, this is basically like, you know, using these. It basically boosts these. But, yeah. The reason why I'm explaining about the staff sorcery scaling is because I have to make you understand that just because something boosts, you know, like a specific sorcery, doesn't mean that's always going to be outperforming something like this. Even though it doesn't have any passive effects, right? As you can see, the attribute scaling, Arcane S rank, Intelligence C, and then Strength D, which you don't pay attention to Strength because that doesn't affect Sorcerer scaling. That never had and never will. The only things that really affects, you know, Sorcerer scalings are like, you know, that physically, you know, affect the Sorcerer scaling of them is Incantation, Faith, and Arcane. That's all it. Because those are like, for example, bleed builds. Why do you think a lot of bleed builds scale a lot into Dexterity or Arcane? It's because those are the primal things for a bleed build. Bleed loss scales off of Arcane. which is why you see a lot of blood bills right now having a shit ton of arcane. And for example, like Sorcerer's Bill, why do you think they have the highest thing, like, leveled up? It's intelligence, because intelligence is basically one of the most important factors for Sorcerer's Build. Without intelligence, sorcerer, your sorcerer's damage from his sorceries is going to be shit, literally. And for like incantation builds, why do you think their faith is so high? It's because faith is what scales with incantations, literally. And the reason why I'm telling you these is because that knowing those and knowing everything I said about the sorcerer scale, an issue will basically be real useful for you when it comes to making builds or setups if you happen to be a max level like me. Anyway, right, right, and let me tell you, and if you are running about what does these sorcerers do that have a crit right now, well, basically, this one right here, Great Blade Phalanx, if an enemy is close enough to you, these things will fire at it and, do damage. Venus Mist, what does this do? It doesn't really do damage, but it builds up Death Blight if they stand in it long enough, and if it does, it's technically an instant kill. Now, the main problem is I have been trying to use this on boss, and I've never seen Death Blight build up full, and it's mostly because they're resistant to Faith-like stuff, and Freya's Mess is most definitely Faith. Like, I mean, if you ever seen Death Sorceries, Freya's Mess counts as a Death Sorcery, but it's just that, you know, since it scales off of Faith and Intelligence, it really doesn't build up that much. And since most enemies are either magic resistant or Faith, or even both, it's kind of hard to build up Deathlight. But mostly the reason why I'm using this is because, like, in PvP, you can throw them off. You can throw a lot of players off with Fierce Mist. I have seen someone did a clever way, and that is by making me attack while they cast this, and every time when they cast it, they run away. So while they're running away, I'm over here still trying to cast spells, being a dumb idiot while I'm sitting in here, and I eventually build up Deathblight and die to it. But, enough about that spell. This spell, Sorcery, Scholar Shield, this basically just buffs your shield. It doesn't boost the stamina recovery feat, no, it just boosts, like, negation rise. It's basically like the Astral War Determination, whatever the fuck you call, that you can equip to shields that basically buff the shield's negations, stuff like that. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's basically like that. Your next spell, Terra Magica. Everybody's favorite, Terra Magica. Why? It boosts your sorceries by 30%. And it's ridiculously high. And using this, that only costs 20 FP, and as long as you're staying in it, you're gonna get that buff, and you can be able to, do a shit ton of damage with your sorceries. Two of your summons, what does this do? This is another death sorcery. But what it does is, like, when you lock on, you spawn these 3 little skeleton dudes that come down and slash down, doing great damage. It's not something I would recommend to use in PvP, but it's something to, like, also throw off enemies. And if it does land, it's going to just delete their health. Now on to the next sorcery, the Great Oracle Bubble. What is this? It's basically like this. It's a bubble, but it does a lot of damage. And the reason why we have this, right, is that it's just a really fun sorcery to use. And a lot of people don't use it that much. There's obviously a reason why, because they prefer faster spells like Night Comet or Comet. Right, but a Great Oracle Bubble, it just does a lot of damage if it lands. Now, that's only if it lands. Now, something else, its brother or its counterpart, or the weaker, or it's basically the first bubble sorcery you get, and that is the Oracle Bubbles. What is that? Well, it just shits out a whole bunch of the Oracle Bubbles that actually does a lot of poise damage and has a chance to stagger enemies where it can land a critical. Now, the reason why we have this is because when you do this right, you can come over here and, you know, do this while the bubbles are up. So if the enemy is dumb enough and gets hit by it while it gets hit by your Bloodthorn Rip, you know, you're talking about some major damage at that point. But anyway, on to the next sorcery, Lucidity. What the hell is Lucidity? Well, what Lucidity does, it activates sleep and madness buildup. Which you'd be like, isn't those builds, like, rendered useless now? Like, is it rare to see them now? I will give you the shocking answer, no. There's still a lot of sleep builds out there, and there's still definitely a lot of madness builds. So having Lucidity that allows the activate buildup is great. It's really great just to have it. So, like, for example, it's like, oh, I'm gonna proc it with madness. Oh, I'm gonna do this, do that. You know, you're gonna be like, denied. And you'll be, and it's also something that they don't suspect either. So when they probably see that, they'd be like, what the fuck? Because they don't really know what it does, because nobody rarely uses it. But, yeah, that's enough about the Lucidity. Briars of Punishment, or Briars of Punishment, it's basically a Bloodthorn sorcery. Which, what makes this unique is that it takes a little bit of your FP, but also your HP. And as you can tell, it casts, you know, Bloodthorns, which obviously build, you know, Bloodlust build up. Now we also have Briars of Sin, which if you want to know what that is, it's basically like Briars of Punishment, but instead of it, you know, going towards your enemy, it wraps around you. And it has 3 stages. So when you do this, right, you know, you're casting a lot of, you know, you basically sacrificing a lot of your FP and your HP when you do that 3-round burst. But here's something I know for a fact, because I use this spell way too much. When you get to that, when you fire off that 3rd one, the enemy that you are literally got caught in your blood thorns is mostly dead. That is 100% guaranteed. It's mostly dead. But the other reason why using the Albinauric staff is just so great using on the Bloodthorn sorcerers, like I said, it boosts, you know, it boosts his blood loss buildup because it scales with Arcane, which is why it's just so good to use with Bloodthorns, and because of, you know, the Albinauric staff, when you fully upgrade it, has sorcery scaling of 400, which is like the 3rd highest, you know, sorcery scaling staff in the game. You know, you're talking about some major damage. Which is why it puts Staff of Guilty in the trash bin. Literally, it just puts it in a trash bin. No need to talk about it anymore. But the other reason why using the Albinauric staff is so great for this build, well, since it's also, since it's, you know, scales with Arcane, obviously, which we actually have 2 Arcane spells, which is the Oracle Bubble spells. As you can see, it requires Intelligence and Arcane. These things actually get boosted by the Albinauric staff, because the Albinauric staff scales with Arcane. And since these 2 scales with Arcane, using the Albinauric staff is basically a no-brainer. Bloodthorn sorceries is the most weirdest oddball I can ever tell you. The attributes required to use this is Faith. 21 Faith, that's it. And And it still bamboozles me why it's like this. Which I always try to ask Irizaki, why did you make it like this? Why does it must scale with faith? Why can it not be arcane? Because obviously, this is obviously something that will obviously require arcane, but nope, it only requires faith. And it doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. It's honestly, like, to this point, kind of stupid. But yeah, that comes to the whole entire conclusion of this build. So if you like this video, drop a like, drop a comment about your opinions about this, and I would love to see y'all use this.